today we have, as Claire said, our special guest victims. But Ellie and Tally, I want to invite them to introduce themselves, and then we can go on to talking about how their insights on how they grew their own communities. And I know Tally was the one who recommended this topic because it's a very legitimate thing that she's experiencing right now and trying to get some best practices from everyone in the world and how they're growing their communities. So we're going to spend 20-25 minutes on our panelists talking about their insights and their backgrounds. And then after that, we're going to open it up for Q&A. How does that sound? You guys ready? Cool. So go ahead, Ellie.
All right, I will go first. It's now 8 after, so I'll work within my 10 minutes. Let me turn on some little screen sharing. So let's start in on this thing. So hi there, I'm Eli. I'm in Vancouver, Canada. And I stumbled into being a community manager, I think like so many of us, totally by accident. I was, a volunteer manager. I was planning events. I was doing some digital marketing campaigns and advocacy work. And then suddenly I was, working within these chapters and people said like, aren't you a community manager? I'm like, let me Google that and find out if that's what I am. And I'm like, I was really excited to discover that there was a title to describe the work I was doing. And that's really part of how I first discovered CMX, because I was Googling around for this new thing I thought I might be. But today I want to talk a little bit about growing a chapter community, and I'll talk specifically about the work that I've been doing here with the NetSquared program for TechSoup. So let me give you the really quick summary of what my chapterized community looks like. It is basically a global network of Tech for Good meetups, all sort of supported and hosted by TechSoup Global, which is a nonprofit that helps nonprofit organizations get access to free and discounted technology and services. We're basically in every country of the world. There's about 1 million members. Membership is free, and we've saved the sector at this point about $14 billion in license fees. So that's kind of exciting. If you have a nonprofit in your life and they're not yet a TechSoup member, they're probably throwing some money away, which would be very sad. But what I want to talk about is NetSquared, which is the support and education side of all of that. And so to be one of the chapters within our community, you basically need to hit these 4 things. I want you to have a Tech for Good theme, so we're not exclusively for nonprofits. It used to be all about in-person. Obviously, we have had to adapt like everyone else has. And there's been all kinds of super interesting lessons out of that. I want people to do monthly. This is not the one-off big conference. We want people to basically create this community hub, and part of how we're going to do that is to come together on a regular basis, and low barrier, which meant usually free. The groups are all over the world, and the format adapts to that. So sometimes it's going to be a pretty informal gathering where people come together. You'll see here it's outside, and just sort of share some best practices they've learned. Other times it's going to be much more like tech tips, getting together. Sometimes it's going to be over a beer, complaining about our bosses at our nonprofit organizations who just don't understand us. And lots of times it'll be a bit more of a formal presentation, whether that's online or lecture style in an event. So that's kind of what we look like as a community. But let's talk about growth. This is the dream. This is what we all kind of want it to happen. But this is often what I find really happens. It can sometimes be really bumpy. And so this is sort of my new chapter growth over the years. You'll see it's been hovering up and down sort of around 10 for a number of years. I had a couple pretty amazing years where it's up to like 35-ish. And of course, now that I'm back into COVID times, I'm once again back to like 1 new chapter a month is where we're at for just straight up growth. So I've tried a couple approaches to goose that growth over the years. And let me say what didn't work for me. The thing that has failed for me several times is marketing campaigns. I've done a big campaign once or twice with Meetup, where we actually sort of went and said like, who is active on Meetup? Who shares some of my like key meetup subject tags, which were like, I care about nonprofits, I care about technology. And we sent some messages out to several thousand people in many cities. I got a whole bunch of leads off that, but they were the worst leads ever. Basically, nobody converted. I wasted my time on like 50 plus phone calls. That did not work. So that kind of proactive push marketing has not been successful for me in growth so far. The other thing I tried to do is lower the barrier to entry. I'm like, what if it was super easy to create a chapter? So at some point I said like, what if they just gave me one event idea? And I said like, okay, once I get them with one event idea, I'll get them into becoming a regular organizer. Again, that actually really failed for me. What I found is I got a whole pile of new groups, but they all just hosted one event. And the overhead for me of actually starting those was not worth it in the end. So I took my barrier up to be high again, which for my community right now is you need to give me 3 events for me to even start up a new chapter for you. And the other thing I've tried to do is city-focused outreach, where I would go through Twitter and search for who was using my keywords in a particular city. And I spent several years trying to create a group in Austin. That did not work. So in many ways, I've really learned that I need to wait for people to come back to me because, frankly, hosting a chapter group is a big ask. It's a high barrier activity. And so people need to be pretty excited about it to make it work. So I did some other things and some things did work. Hooray. Let me talk about those. So the key has been around retention and reactivation. I think anyone in the sales world will tell you that, the best, thing to do is keep your existing customers rather than going out and finding new customers. That's expensive and time consuming. So retention has actually been the key to my growth over the years. So basically, I just have reduced the churn, and therefore, when I have new people come in, my total number goes up. The other key thing I've learned over the years is about process and CRM. So when I started bringing my organizers into basically a sales funnel style CRM, where I sort of brought them through and then like knew where they were at each stage. And because they were now in the CRM, I could like trigger automatic reminders and basically also just keep myself on track. I was able to really increase the number of successful conversions from application to group leadership. So that's been a major learning lesson for me is processes. Just like you got to do it. You got to put it into the CRM. You got to track it through each step and follow up with people over and over again until you basically harass them into exhaustion or they disappear. And so that sales funnel is super important because it also helps you identify where are you losing people in your process. So here's one of my older sales funnel. And you can see basically this was showing some of what happened when I did that big meetup email recruitment process where I had 150 applications come out of that, which was amazing. Like that was many, many years worth of applications. But I was only even converting 37 of those 150 to just having a phone call with me. Most of them just disappeared. They were really low quality leads. So to me, that was like, oh, that's a real problem. Like, why am I losing that many people between my application and my actual conversion of an interview? And I actually tweaked that process later to turn that into much more of like, a 70% conversion rate over time. And then from there, then the other thing is to say like, well, how do I increase the conversion of my new groups launched from the people who actually got to the interview process? So it was helping me just sort of figure out where I'm losing people and what I could tweak within the funnel there. The other thing that's been super important to me is referral. So many of the people coming into my community as new chapter leaders are coming because basically someone said, hey, you'd be great at this. In fact, I formalized that into an ambassador program where I basically had 5 regional ambassadors who would go to conferences, go to places, and basically preach the good gospel of why you should be a chapter leader. And when I did that, actually in those years, 44% of my leader referrals were coming directly from those 5 people. So they were a really powerful force out there building the community for me. And the other thing I learned is I can't lose people. Speed is of the essence. So when you looked at why I was losing so many people from initial application to scheduling a phone call, is because there was a back and forth. I had to send them a link. And so eventually what I did is embed my booking form directly into the form completion page. And that totally changed everything for me. Now, obviously, I didn't have anyone, like I didn't have a pre-test, like a lot of people got calls, some of whom didn't need it. But the win of getting way more people to the calls has totally been worth it. And then the last thing I do with leaders is I focus really deeply in my interviews around the value proposition. So we go deeply into not so much like, are they skilled at planning events, but why do they want to do this? What do they want to get out of it? Maybe they're a consultant and they want to build their community. Maybe they want to give back and they're looking for some structure around it. But because we really get to figure out what's driving people to participate, from there, then we can help them create something where they'll actually be in the role for years. And that, again, is the real key part to the retention. So that is my 10 minutes. Thank you so much for being with me for this quick overview of what I've done with my community over the last couple of years.
Great. Thank you, Ali. Eli, my God, you never corrected me.
Whatever. My last name is Vander Giesen, which is even worse. I'll take any name. I'm fine.
E, the master E, I shall call you. Thank you for that. Tally, you're up.
Hi. Yes. Thank you, Ellie. I'm gonna find a lot of matching points that you mentioned, and it's very nice. So I don't have a presentation, so we will just see me for the next 10 minutes. If I'm stepping over. So my name is Talia Vasilevsky. I'm part of the Elementor team. Elementor is a website builder platform for WordPress. It's been a while since I was speaking at a meetup, so sorry for me being a little bit of nervous. I want to thank Tina and Claire for inviting me, for hosting me today. So I have a question for you. How many of you are leading chapter programs? You can raise your hand or write in the chat. Edmund, hi. It's fantastic. So, okay. So I'm going to share with you today some of my main takeaways from the last year. I joined the company about a year and a half ago, and the meetup program started 6 months before that. So the initial goal when starting the program was to create the in-person engagement between local web creators, bringing them together, discussing their professional goals and their business goals, and helping each other on a local basis. And I have to say that we were very hesitant with virtual events back then because we didn't want it to become a webinar type of events that people are not able to interact. So we didn't recommend any virtual events. When I came to play in my 2020 plans, we were focusing on growth, growing with 100% over with our meetup groups globally. And I was focusing on finding meetup leaders for all these new chapters that we're planning to kick off. And like Ellie mentioned, it's not an easy job to do. But then when coming to February, I got an application from a Hong Kong chapter. They wanted to start their meetup, but they were already hit by the pandemic, which meant that they can only create an online event. So I took a few days to see if we can support it and if we want to do that, creating some guidelines. And during the same days, I started receiving messages from our European leaders saying they need to cancel their in-person meetups because of the pandemic. This was the moment that I realized that we need to think over and make a decision, because it looks like the entire world is going to be shut down, which was really happening. So 1 month later, we gathered all our leaders and shared that from now on they can do online events, and we don't recommend having in-person until it's going to be safe to go back to in-person, which we know that did happen till now for most of the world. Some of the main guidelines that we shared with them were skipping the Zoom meeting format and not using the feature of webinar to maintain the ability to interact. Ask attendees to open their cameras and audio, again, to make sure they can speak with one another and not only use the chat. Use breakout rooms, polls, and anything else, any other third-party application that can help people drive engagement and interaction during the meetup. So going forward, we saw some great opportunities coming out of this situation. For example, in Spain and Germany, we saw local leaders come together to unite and create a plan for events on a weekly basis. This way, they are answering the community needs with various topics, allowing everyone to attend, of course, not related to their location, but also preventing competition between one another, and not going to the sphere of online fatigue, which was very common those days. We also saw leaders starting to attend other meetups in our network and as speakers and attendees, which was also something that we were really glad to see and endorse that. Till today, they have joined meetups, which is something that wasn't very possible before. One of our first wins was doing a virtual road trip that we initiate from our headquarters. Throughout 8 weeks, we visited, I think it was 15 chapters, bringing team members virtually to attend the meetups and speaking with our community, sharing their expertise, and it was a very successful type of event and something that we will definitely fulfill this year again. From these activities, we saw growth in our network and also growth in the groups, which was occurring from the fact that people were just joining different groups based on topics and not locations. When going to build the plan for 2021, I realized that I have an opportunity to create something entirely new based on the last year. We're still preserving the local groups, hoping that they will go back to in-person someday. But we also will need to differentiate and understand what their value in the phase of staying online till then. So we're looking to get more deeper in-person connection and interaction, helping the leaders create meaningful relationship for the local groups and their attendees. And at the same time, we're starting new types of meetup groups. For example, something like this is topic-based events, meetup groups, that will have events that focus on the same topic, which will allow for advanced users, for example, to share their knowledge, grow together, upgrade their skills, and it will be open for the same language and in the same region for everyone. We're also looking forward to strengthen the interaction between the Elementor team and the community. So we're going to start an HQ and community joint meetup. If you have any successful examples for that, I would love to hear that from you. So our main takeaways from this year was more than ever a focus on content and engagement. and understanding that we can bring a lot of value to our different group of users with the online events, and definitely keeping that with our roadmap, our community roadmap for the future. And that we have amazing community and leaders, and it's something that is priceless and definitely was a great help during this last year. So now, what are your learnings from this last year? Thank you.
Thank you, Tally. So I have a question for you. You mentioned at some point you said you are going to have a meetup with the headquarters people joining in, and you ask what our experiences are. Can you say again what you were talking about or what you were needing help on?
I want to create like a safe space for employees at Elementor to speak with the community and the community to speak with them. But I don't want it to be like an Elementor employee is doing a lecture to the community, because it's not something unique. We can just do it on regular meetups. I want to create a discussion. So I'm still looking for the specific concept, but understanding that I want to create a real discussion between this, like both groups, which in the end, by the way, a lot of our employees are web creators by their own. They came to work here because they were building websites before. So they have the same joint ground, and I believe that the outcome of this discussion and this type of meetings can be very valuable for both sides.
Thank you. Claire or Eli, do you have any thoughts on that?
For my community, I think our experiment around doing that joint idea is, now that we've online events, we've actually been doing like sort of these best of samplers, taking like the presenters from local chapters and basically saying like, let's put 5 of those into one event where everyone's doing like a quick 10-minute sampler and bring that to the wider community. So I'm trying to sort of bring some of the work that's happening from local chapters to the broader community of TechSoup.
I would say to the question about sort of bringing the community together with HQ and how to make sure it's a discussion. I think a large part of it is simply setting the expectations up front, like, you know, letting both sides know that it's supposed to be a discussion, not a presentation. And I would think about, you know, you mentioned that a lot of the employees are web creators too, and so they might have useful tips for the community. I would think about if there's things like that from both sides, like what is each side going to hope to learn from the other, and maybe call that out as like an agenda. So like the first half, you're going to be able to ask our employees questions about blah, blah, blah. And then the second half, our employees are going to ask you all questions about whatever it is. And then people can start thinking about questions ahead of time too, and that can help sort of kickstart the discussion.
Thank you. It's a great idea.
Cool. Tali, was there any other specific questions? I know that you're in the process of growing your community. Any other specific questions you have that you know?
So I think that Ali answered, like sharing his example was given a lot of ideas and thoughts about the funnels of leaders applications. And I also big number to grow last year, and then this year we just need to say goodbye to this number. And also I'm reducing what we're going to do. I'm going to reduce the number of local groups on the case of growing like the topic and language based and country based groups, which is we're going to have less number of groups, but much more people maybe attending those events, and people joining the network, which is much more important than the number of events or the number of groups. but it is a change that I needed to went through this year.
Cool. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat, and Juan Diego Castaño, I don't know if I said that right, wants to talk about community funnels. So do you want to unmute and just talk a little bit about your question, Juan?
Okay, like Elijah says that, sorry, my twins from, sorry. Elijah says about the sales funnel. We can convert to the community funnel to obtain some leaders of our communities, or just to set up to the members and memberships. I don't know to say that. Sorry, my English is so. I speak in Spanish.
Well, look, you're already bilingual, so you're ahead of the game on me. Count me as impressed. So let me hazard a guess at this. So when I've done the funnels, I will say I've only focused my funnel work on the actual, like the chapter leaders, the organizers' work. I haven't taken that same model to the attendees and participants. I think there'd probably be lots of lessons and things to learn there. I'll be honest, at this moment, all of my participants have been in meetup.com, which meant I just didn't know anything about those people. It was sort of the data black hole, which is part of why I'm actually in the process of moving into Bevy, so we can actually maybe start doing some of that work. So I'd say from my standpoint, I haven't done it because of, I guess, time and technical limitations.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments, have experience with the funnel?
So I have a question. Ali, you mentioned that you added to the application the option to book the meeting immediately after applying. How many, so it was a much more conversion, but how many of these people weren't relevant after the talk?
The answer is I haven't done that in-depth look. So I can't give you the same numbers as I could as that initial funnel where I stopped and did, like, every 2 years you try and stop and say, like, what's actually happening now? And you take a month and just like look through the numbers. So I don't have data for you on that one, but I can certainly say I have a strong gut feeling that I had some no good phone calls with people because they didn't have a barrier, like I didn't have to check between them filling out the form and answering a phone call. I will say that a phone call is so powerful as a scaring people off mechanism, which is exactly what I need at that point, because I want people to host a conversation like this. And if they can't get on a phone call with me, they're probably not the right kind of person to lead a group. So I would find that there's a large self-selection bias in there of just people who will even book that phone call with me, even when I really reduce the barrier. That said, do I sometimes have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and then no one shows up for the call and it was a waste of my time? Yes. But I found, as you could see in the other chart where you could just see like the number of new chapters launched per year, when I put that process in, it is a net win for sure, in that I was just getting so many more qualified leads in there that I could, then bring them into real chapter.
Okay, thank you for that. Juan, I want to answer your question. Actually, I want to give my input. I love the funnel. I learned funnels from digital marketing, and I read this book, John O'Bacon. There's some templates in here. And so for me, I work for a nonprofit that supports women's health businesses, brand new nonprofit. And so I help them build a community. So the way I think about funnel is, the first one is the public. So anybody who reads our social media account is the public. From there, if they love our message and they follow us on social media and they join our online group, whether Facebook group or Mighty Networks, then I call them a casual member, right? So the public and then casual member, and then they attend our events. And if they attend 2 or 3 or 4 more events, then they become, there's different names for it, but we call it a fem fan, like a super fan. So public, casual member, super fan, I call it. And then once they join our paid network, right? So we called it FemPro. So it's like a female women's health group, professional group. So it's a FemPro member. So the way I had to explain this to the team, that when we promote on social media, we're trying to get as many people to love us, to follow us on social media. And then the next funnel is to join our online community, because if they're in that online community with their Facebook group or LinkedIn group, for us, we use Mighty Networks, then you know that everyone who joins that group has a common desire to support and know about women's health. And so any messages that we have, any announcement, we just put it in the group. And we have a lot of events to make sure they move up the funnel. One of the key events we did is we have to make sure we have a weekly event, same time, same day. Happy hour is always popular. So we had a podcast listening party. All we do is listen to a podcast that our founder did the previous week. And it's just getting to know people. And from there, we've found that people want to invest in startups, that people want to volunteer to host a book club. They pay the paid membership. So we use it as a sales funnel. It's a brand new thing. We experimented with how we make this succeed. But I was very open to the team. Let's try everything. Let's figure out what works and doesn't work for our community. Does that make sense, Juan?
Yes, that's complete answer. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. And then on the chat itself, August, you had a question and you had a whole discussion with Eli there. I couldn't read it. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Oh, sorry, I'm just coming back on. There we go. Basically, I was just looking at setting up an ambassador scheme for my own community, and it's a business-to-business community. So our ambassadors would be the thought leaders of our group. So I basically was just wanting to understand Elijah's thoughts on it, and because he did say that he's done an ambassador scheme before, so I was very interested to know how he would incentivize those individuals.
Cool. The Google developer groups and Google business groups are also an example of an ambassador program. Same for Eli, they give the volunteers some funding to pay for event organizing expenses, and then the swag alone with Google t-shirts brings people to the meetup. So
yeah, I was thinking whether it would be something like along the line of kind of like branded products or kind of like services or discounted like items that we could be doing. I don't know, I was trying to just think of like ideas and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can brainstorm and ask your members, August, what they think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ideally, of course, lean into things that you have that don't cost you money, but have value. So as an example, in my world, we have a paid online courses program for nonprofits. But of course, throwing 5 more accounts out there doesn't cost us anything. But I'm like, but it costs like $100 a month. So it's the kind of thing you want to do because it's sustainable and brings, of course, those people more deeply into your products, your community as well, builds their expertise.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about incentivizing people, though, is you have to start with the intrinsic motivations. They have to be motivated intrinsically to do this in the first place. And then whatever other things you give them have to be just a nice bonus on top of it. And the sort of the mindset of like, how can we give them stuff that doesn't cost us anything is actually not just about money saving. It's the right mindset for successfully incentivizing these people too. If they're doing it for a t-shirt, they're not going to keep doing it unless you keep sending them t-shirts.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I want there to be a value for them as well. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm joining this thought, Claire, because like we're thinking a lot what we want to give and what is the right thing to give, because it's giving something it's not, we don't want people that their motivation is to be to get a license or to be something. We want them, so we're not even mentioning this in the process because it's like a bonus for them wanting to be there and give to the community.
Yeah, like speak to them, survey them, whatever it is, find out what it is they're getting from it. Maybe they just enjoy feeling like they have some influence. Maybe they love helping and giving back. Maybe they want to feel more connected to you and the company. They want to have access to staff members. There's a whole like slew of different things that are intrinsic motivations that you can lean on. You just have to figure out exactly what it is that they want.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. That's great advice.
Questions from anyone?
I have a question. I just posted it in the chat, but yeah, I'll just read it out. We're using like a lot of virtual, we're doing like a lot of virtual events with our community leaders who are using Bevy, and we're collecting a lot of that feedback, and it's all just going into Tableau, and it's dashboarded very nicely so that you can visualize all the things that we're asking them, like, hey, do you have any suggestions on what you can improve upon? But I just was wondering if you guys had any tips on how to like really utilize that feedback to make necessary changes for community leaders.
So I can share that we're doing, after each event, asking the leaders to submit a recap, which includes things that they had good for the meetup and things that they would like to improve for the next one. And I'm tracking this to see how can I help them to improve the things that that they want to improve, and how we can share the things that are working for them and can be relevant for other leaders. And we're also doing I think every half month, like a survey for the leaders, just to understand if they're happy with their status from the program, the things that they're getting from us as the community team, and also from their role, because again, they need to benefit, to complete their initial goals. So we're constantly checking that to understand how we can improve.
Is it Kyron?
Let's see.
So what you're saying is how to feedback the results of the metrics to the community? Is that?
Yes, yeah. I was just wondering if there was like a specific cadence that you guys preferred, like to keep them in touch with like the feedback that's going on, or, I'm just welcome to any tips. I'm sort of new to the role, so.
Yeah, usually what works for me is I will just say, hey, we have some, we did the survey and we have some feedback we want to share with you. We'd like to discuss it. So you just a feedback session, or be specific about what you want to talk about. And then if they love it, you can make it as a regular thing once a month so that you don't forget about it. And make sure during the first meeting that you encourage people, whether they like it, not like it. Eventually, I will usually surface a volunteer from the members to run the next one.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Community metrics can be sort of difficult to interpret and difficult to know if you should even care about them or not. Like, overall, you should care about some metrics, but understanding which ones are important and why can be tricky. So to Tina's point, like interpreting them for the community members. So you're not just saying, here are the numbers, but actually saying, and they mean this, this, and this. We suggest these changes, that kind of thing.
Okay. The CMX industry report, the community industry report, Kyron, has awesome information for you, because what metrics you gather depends on what's the goal for the community. So if the goal of the community is to get new users, then the industry report will tell you what metrics people are gathering in order to meet that goal. Because usually management will say, did we get more sales? Did we get more customers, right? That's usually the management business objective. But then the community manager is, are they happy? Are they engaged? You will probably have a different metric there. So take a look at the industry report.
Right. Well,
anyone else? This is your opportunity to get your problems discussed and potentially solved by this awesome group of people. This is just for us.
Thank you for putting a caveat on potentially solved. You know, there's a lot of pressure on us.
I know, Eli, I want a copy of your presentation.
Sure thing. It was 5 pictures, but you're welcome to it for sure.
That's the usual question for attendees. You can just post it on the Slack channel.
Fabulous idea. Great. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I want to hear about. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I just want to hear about, yeah, how other people have, like, what's been good for them in growing their community. I mean, as I've talked about, for me, it was all mostly having an organization with enough of Google juice that I could have an application form out there on the internet, and people showed up and filled it out. And it was always just like, oh, I'm not quite sure how they came from, and often it was referrals or they went to another event. But I want to hear from you, like, what's been useful for you to get people into your community? Like, what's been your most successful, like, growth strategy?
See, for me, it's 2 things. To have a regular gathering, ideally once a week, same day, same time, because people build a habit of showing up. And specifically for the organization I'm working with, is Women's Health. It's Monday night, and we always position it as a happy hour. People love happy hour, right? It's like, it's only an hour, but then it's an awesome discussion because it's almost like a group watch. We listen to a podcast episode, but then we make live comments on the chat, and it's hilarious. So it makes people comfortable so that it's easier for us to say, hey, these are our next events, and they show up because they know that we deliver good value and that we're awesome people. So they show up at our next events. So that's one. And then the other thing too is, if I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing next with my organization, I just put the question to the community. And the whole design thinking methodology is, what are your top problems? So I will usually just post, hey, how are you doing this week? What kinds of issues are you dealing with this week? Just something very informal to kind of figure out what people are working with, because then it'll help me decide what my next plan is going to be. And then I'll say, hey, last week you said you wanted to do X. I think we can resolve that problem by doing 1, 2, 3. Which one do you think? Right? The 1, 2, 3 are the things I want to do that will not cost me a lot of money. And then I just solicit feedback from the community to figure out what the priority is.
Eli, you're muted.
Can I put a couple of people on the spot here? August, you're off mic, which means you now get to tell us what your top, like, growth success is right now. Oh, sorry, you're back on mute again.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm still in the very beginning stages. So I only joined my company about 6 weeks ago. And my first project was to launch a platform for one of their portfolios. And their target audience is HR professionals of seniority across the world. They already had their database, and we pulled them from one of their biggest events. So a virtual summit that took place last week, and then we pulled them across into the community platform. So it worked really nicely with the user journey. And then I decided to use Mighty Networks simply because we didn't have the funds to develop something in-house, and we weren't actually sure how it was going to go either. So they wanted to spend as little money as possible for the platform, but Mighty Networks actually worked really well. I've been really impressed with all the key functionalities and also the event schedule as well. So the whole idea is that we're going to be putting across the members into a roundtable discussion weekly, and then they can network and join live content as and when. So yeah, it's working well so far. I've got about 100 members on there in the first week, and we also want to put in the ambassador scheme as well to potentially grow the platform. But for us, I don't think it's actually more amount of members. We actually want it to just be high engagement.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I think there's demand here that Claire get on mic and tell us all about your learnings from Coursera. Like, what's leading to growth for you?
Yeah, I was just typing in the chat box actually, but it's going to be a lot easier to talk about it. So my community is an online asynchronous text-based forum community. So it's somewhat different to a lot of this conversation has been around chapters, but the big thing for us that really helped. We had very slow growth when we first launched our community, and the way we turned that around, we sent out a survey to everyone who was in our community and people who'd been in like a previous community of ours, sort of saying, why aren't you going here? What's going on? And what we found is basically no one knew about our community. So I think, what I was going to put in the chat box, I think there are two fundamental things that you absolutely have to have for growth, and everything else is sort of just peripheral. So the first one is awareness, right? People have to know that your community exists. And then the other one is the value that they get from the community, the reason to participate, or the reason to show up and listen, to read and learn, whatever it is. Like, you have to be meeting a need for somebody. That's why they go to the community or why they show up to the events. And then everything else, if you have those two fundamental things, anything else you do is maybe going to accelerate the growth. But if you have those two things in place, your growth sort of will continue to happen regardless.
Thank you. Sam, I'm going to call on you in a minute, but before that, is it okay if I take a group photo, you guys? Yes? If you don't want to, just mute. And for those who want to join the group photo, please show up on video so we look like we're having a good time. Ready? 1, 2. Jane, ready? 1, 2, 3. There you go. Thank you. Sam, go ahead.
Sure. So just a small amount of context. I work for a nonprofit called Net Impact. We are a global community of students and professionals using their skills and careers to make the world a better place. So we have had a long history of chapters. We were formed by a group of chapters about 30 years ago. So I will talk a little bit about our growth and then what we're doing now. So we have about 400 chapters now. At our peak, we were growing at about 75 to 100 a year. And so at that point, we were doing the sort of full gamut of things. So, we had people who were coming to our website and wanting to start a chapter from that. Sorry, one other important caveat. So because we're a chapter-based organization, we as the headquarters say that we have chapters and those chapters have members. And so our sort of organizing mechanism is getting people to start chapters, and then the membership flows out from that. So we had all of that. We also, for a while, had a part of a person's time on staff doing outreach to people who were sort of interested, had similar types of groups, but might want to become a chapter to sort of get access to our global network. We also have the benefit of running a relatively large annual conference every year, and then a whole bunch of programs that draw in people, some of whom are part of our chapters and some of whom are not. And we do things like differential pricing for our conference. So if you join or start a chapter, you got a discount on your ticket. So that whole range of things really helped. And it's something that took time. So like if you look back at our history, like the growth was relatively slow and focused in North America. And then it just sort of spread out from that and then gradually picked up speed. The caveat to that is that about a year ago, we stopped actively starting new chapters. So we basically took all of our FTE focus and kept that on our existing chapter community because we thought it was going to be a particularly difficult moment, which it has been. And so we have basically put a hold on things. We are still collecting that interest, but we've basically told people at some point in the future, we'll have a new process. We also are going to move to an automated process. Our funnel is pretty similar to what Eli was talking about, but we're going to automate a huge portion of that so that people are going to move themselves through that funnel. And then when they get to the point where they are quote unquote ready, they'll do a couple things and then we'll let them officially start a chapter. And I'm happy to share more if pieces of that are helpful for people, but yeah.
Very cool. If I want to be respectful of time, we have 3 minutes left. I want to say, Sam, if it's okay, people have questions, if they can DM you, is that something? And also if people have questions for me, feel free to connect afterwards. But at this time, I wanted to invite Tali to talk about the new CMX Connect chapter that she's hosting.
Yes, thank you. I'm unmuted. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Great. I'm starting a CMX Connect chapter for user group and chapter program managers. So you are all invited to join. I'm sharing now the link to the first event, which will be in April. And the goal of the chapter is just bringing together program managers to discuss and learn from one another and set goals and understand what is going in other places to benefit from that and just grow together professionally and have fun, of course. Cool. And I'm looking for a co-host, so just if somebody is interested, let me know.
Claire and Eli, do you have any closing summaries?
No, except I so love nerding out with you about this kind of stuff. And I'm super excited to, be part of these communities. And I'm so joining Tali's group. And you might be able to twist me into getting more involved, twist my arm. Let's talk about that.
I will be glad to. And I want to thank Ellie for joining today and Tina for introducing me to Ellie because I haven't, of course, met him in the past and just for this great meeting today.
Eli's a man. Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's great to have these meetups. It's so good to see people come every month and continue to grow and we're figuring out new and different topics every time. It kind of blows my mind how we talk about such vastly different things, but it's all related to community building and always so good to get everyone's perspectives and advice. There's always everyone's done different things and learned different things and has different advice. So it's so good to sort of bring it all together and put that together for the group sort of knowledge to be expanded a little bit. So thank you to everybody for joining, and especially if you shared some advice, your perspective, or a question. Thank you.
Yes, and you want to talk about next month?
What are we doing next month? Is that gamification? Okay. You've got so organized. We're now booked up months in advance, and I'm like, which month are we doing what? Yeah, next month, if you are interested, we will be talking about gamification. This is obviously much more for sort of online forum-based communities than in-person ones, although some of the principles may be applicable. But yeah, I think it's a very controversial topic. It can help you grow your community a lot. It can also wreck your community, I think. So hopefully some interesting discussions to be had around that one.
Very cool. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our speakers, to everyone who joined in, who participated. See you next month. If you have any specific questions, feel free to DM any one of those folks here. This is what we're here for.
Thank you, everyone. See you next event. Bye.
Ciao, later.
Bye-bye.